feeling like I'm actually getting Liam Gallagher. As Jeremy says, thank you everyone. I'm Andy Winter. I am Director of Student Support Services here at Sheffield. And I almost wasn't here this morning due to some travel difficulties that I had on the way. I started work at the University of Sheffield 10 months ago, and one of the reasons I took the job at Sheffield, I applied for the job at Sheffield, was because I could commute from where I live, where my family lives in Nottingham. My family, I've worked at a number of universities, and my family was very kind and followed me around the country, to the point that when my son was 5, he lived in as many houses as he's been years old. And at a certain point, my wife went, we need to be serious, we need to settle now. This is the forever job, right? Which job's forever? No. But then Sheffield came up, and it was great because I could, where I lived in Nottingham, in Eastern Islands, if anybody knows Nottingham, I'm 5 minutes from the train station. And it was so great. I could get a train 5 minutes into Nottingham, 50 minutes up to Sheffield. It was fantastic. So this morning, as I normally do on my commute, I got up at 5 o'clock, got showered, dressed, to the train station, got into Nottingham station for 25 to 7, and got on the train. And it left on time. And it went 10 minutes out of Nottingham, and then it stopped. It stopped for 20 minutes in a tree and a secluded area where I thought, this is a bit dangerous. And then the driver came on and said, one of the engines has failed, and we're going to have to go back to Nottingham. And so 10 minutes later, I was sat back in Nottingham station waiting for the 7:45 train into Sheffield. Now my plan was that what I would do is I'd come in early, I would walk up to the edge from the train station, it's about a 50-minute walk. On the way I'd stop, do some work, quite a lot of things on today. So I was looking at the train and I was like, I've got all these things to do, I've got to leave here, I'm presenting at a disability equality event straight afterwards, I've got to get down to that now. This is it's really bad when you lose the train. I was feeling really despondent, really. I sent Jeremy an email apologising, really, really sorry, it's probably not going to be able to make it, and the timing's just not going to work with this. Can you apologise to Jana? Sat next to Jana at dinner last night. I was really looking forward to the reflections. At the same time, I didn't realise this as I was writing the email, I pressed send on the email, and then a chat message popped up from Jeremy that said, Andy, we'd love you to say a few words in closing at this ceremony. I thought, you know what, Andy, call on you, get yourself together. Lots of people here who've come from much further away than you have to get to this event. And after waiting 2 years, to come to it as well. So the least you can do is, get a taxi from the train station. And if you arrive 5 minutes late, people will probably forgive you. These are all people with faith. What they're about. So I thought, I'll get myself there. And I was just saying, and then when I got to Sheffield, it was great because I got to Sheffield, I went for the taxi rank, there was no one in the line for the taxi rank. It's like, this is amazing, go straight to the taxi. Got the taxi, every light was on green. I was like, this is exciting. This is like it is meant to be. I'm meant to make this speech that I'm now furiously writing in a taxi. So now that I'm actually here, what do I want to say? Well, firstly, there's a couple of things I want to say. I want to say a big thank you to Jeremy and the chaplaincy team here. As with most large events, you plan for things to go a certain way, and then things happen, and you have to adjust at short notice. There's been a lot of that going on, but I think the way that the team has done that, the things that they've done to put this delivery together for this event has been fantastic. And I'm really, really grateful for their efforts. I'm really proud, actually, for what they've demonstrated about the staff that we have here. They really are a credit to our institution, so thank you, Jeremy. And thank you all the staff. Secondly, I want to thank all of the speakers who I got the chance to hear from at the event. I've not managed to come to every day at the conference. I managed to come for a bit on Monday, and I specifically carved out yesterday, so I have time to hear people speak. But I found the speeches that I have heard really, really insightful and really thought-provoking. One of the things that I'm really conscious about as Director of Student Support Services, and Harvey knows this from I used to work at Nottingham, and when I was there and worked with the chaplaincy at Nottingham. And one of the things that I'm really keen on is how do we create a supportive environment for students, an environment that feels comfortable, where you can have challenge, but that challenge feels appropriate, where it doesn't feel so negative that it heavily impacts the experience. You know, the conversations about pastoral care and well-being, student support as part of that, and where does chaplaincy fit? And I was saying to a colleague last night, my view is very much that you know, often when I talk to people that say, oh, yeah, mental health, what you need is more counsellors. It's like saying, you know, we don't need to worry about, when we go and push people out of planes, we don't need to worry about whether the planes are safe, or whether we've done any training with the people on the ground, or whether we do a tandem jump or anything else. You just need a parachute, it'll be fine. And we all know that when you do a risk assessment, what you do is you try and reduce all of the risk out of things beforehand. There's lots that you can do before you get to the clinical intervention. And actually creating a supportive community, creating an environment where you're stretched, where you're challenged, but in a way that doesn't feel completely uncomfortable. I was really struck by the keynote yesterday where the speaker was talking about, you know, that balance between peace and harmony and justice, and how actually if it's too peaceful, actually that probably means that there is some injustice that's there, that something's not being addressed, something's not being challenged. And I think that's very true in universities. The chaplaincy plays such a fundamental role in helping to create those spaces where people can not only be challenged, but they can work through how they feel about that challenge, where you have two groups that clearly hold very different opinions to each other. I was also really struck by the closing ceremony yesterday, which I believe Jeremy put together a very short notice, but I thought was genuinely one of the best sessions I've been to at any conference ever. The vibe in that room was incredible. I think the openness, the honesty of some of those conversations. No, Jeremy was, it's terrible, it's like therapy. It's like everything happens in the last 5 minutes. I said, well, you know, that's probably a measure of is the fact that over the last 4 days of the conference, people have got to know each other, got to feel comfortable with each other, and you can only do this at this point because of everything that's come beforehand. It's the foundation that's built to get to this point. But yeah, it was just incredible. And there's a colleague of mine who was with me for the event. She had to leave before that. I took great pleasure in saying you missed the best one. And that leads me on to my final group today, which is all you. Because I think you know, that event worked because of all your contributions that you've made, because you've built those relationships. I've had a number of discussions with people, I talked about Jana last night, but a number of discussions with people over the time that I've been here that again have been really insightful, really thought-provoking conversations. I know that that's been the case for everyone else. In those conversations, people have said to me, I was talking to such and such from this, and they made me think about this thing. You know, hearing some of the reflections at dinner as well. I hope the pudding was good last night. I had to leave after the main meal. So I don't know if I mentioned it. I forgot to try and miss the best bit. Do you know what? I got home at about 20 past 11 last night. I finally walked through the door, I was in bed. And I went to the fridge and I got a white chocolate magnum out. Because I knew that I missed the pudding. And I thought, well, I don't feel good because I was going to have a pudding. I went upstairs and my wife was in bed. She was like, you're down. Anyway, so thank you very much. Thank you for all your contributions. I really do hope that you've enjoyed your time here at Sheffield. I hope you found this a wonderful institution. As I say, I joined 10 months ago, and I've loved working at Sheffield so far. It's such a welcoming place, such an open place as a city, it's such a great city as well. So I hope you've had a great time while you've been here. I hope you enjoyed the university and the city. And I hope you go away with lots of good ideas, things that you can take back to when you're working with people you work with to help improve their lives. Thank you very much.
Hello and good morning to those who missed the first good morning. It's lovely to see you all here this morning. My name is Cass Howes. I'm a member of the International Association. It's my delight and my privilege to introduce to you Harvey Belovski and Jana Bennett, who will help us, who will reflect with us on what has been hopefully a very valuable week for most of us. So, Rabbi Dr. Harvey Belovski is Senior Rabbi of the Golders Green Synagogue in London, and he's also a long-standing faculty member of the Senior Faith Leadership Programme, which I participated in once upon a time. Dr. Jana Bennett is Professor and Chairperson of the Department of Religious Studies at the University of Dayton. Without any ado, I'm going to hand over to them now to take us through this reflection session. Please do come and guide us. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm very glad to be here with you to just take a moment to reflect a little bit. And Harvey and I agreed that I would take a few minutes at the beginning, and then he'll give a kind of a longer discussion in a bit. And this reflection I'm doing in part with you because I have borrowed the photos from WhatsApp, and so several photos from WhatsApp that have been shared you will see on the screen. And so I think I didn't know who took the photos necessarily, so thank you all in advance. If there are photos that didn't make it on the screen that you think should have, I apologize in advance. And I don't know that every single event ever got captured, obviously not in a week, but I'm very grateful for that joint effort. And the title of this, I decided I borrowed from Anthony Betty's talk on Wednesday, Roots and Roots. He did that play on words, at least that's what I heard. I mean, having a hearing loss means maybe I make up stuff that is too. But anyway, he did this play on words, roots and roots. And he said that, and I was thinking about roots, so I wanted to do a riff on that, our roots as our identity, our locality, the things with which we are concerned on a daily basis, the things we focus on as our kind of vocation and that sort of thing. And then the roots, our journeys, our great and small journeys, our spiritual journeys, our maybe virtual journeys, like pilgrimages, if you will, our physical roads and our mental roads. And Anthony said something, he said, the route as the journey we take complicates our roots, as in our identity and so forth. And this was at the midpoint of the week, and I thought it was such a great way to think about both what had come and what was to come. And so here are a few reflections on that. I was thinking about our roots. I was thinking about conversations that I heard at the beginning of the week. All of us were coming from a place of both COVID relief and exhaustion, that finally we could be here together after, for me it had been 4 years since I first heard about this conference. But we were also exhausted. I could see that in everybody's face, just the exhaustion of the past 2 years. We were coming with great diversity, and we were coming very mindful of global crises, especially war and around the planet, and also the planet itself. But here we were gathering and beginning to create some small roots at the University of Sheffield, even as we were coming from our rootedness in other places. Several of you, I think, didn't make the pre-conference. The pre-conference was this informal gathering of people. There were multiple kinds of conversations, and I am realizing this doesn't show up the way I would like, but it's a word map of a few of the presentations that I was able to get to. So, God, instrument, empowerment, being, health, paradigm response, safe, chaplaincy, there's multiple things that are here. And I know that the people at others at the pre-conference would have had similar, but very different word maps. But this was also a way of thinking about both our roots. I think people were bringing their roots and bringing them to those pre-conferences. Now then I thought, very interesting to have the opening ceremony as, with starting with work on boats, because it made me think about the kinds of journeys that we might take in those boats together this week. And we also heard from Patrick Okuma and Anthony Reddy again, asking where are the borders, where are the gateways, as we think about this journey that we're about to embark on Monday night. And then I think we began to focus on roots in liberty, and I think our conference speakers, when I think about Monday and Tuesday, our speakers, I think they were thinking from their own level, their own rootedness, and asking us to reflect on our own rootedness. So here are just a few of those kinds of moments. I heard a lot this week, not just on Monday and Tuesday, but a lot about this, how there's a kind of intersection, maybe especially in the UK, of Christian heritage, religious pluralism, and increasing secularity, those three together. I think in my own context, I would say something different. But again, that's where your roots and my roots were kind of intersecting a bit. Questions about young adults not identifying as religious, human chaplaincy, questions of mental health, and then the idea of being all disabled or temporarily able-bodied. There's all of those roots that we bring together as we start reflecting on our own roots. And here's our rootedness in this location as we begin our roots together. And then we had the chance to visit, to take some roots into Sheffield and visit local religious communities. And so I think I was able to get all of the communities in some way, shape, or form, and I also included the peace rally at the end. And then on Wednesday, we turned to roots and legacies, the legacies that are left behind, especially the legacies that we need to deal with and confront. And Anthony Reddy helped us think about that. So he gives us another quote about rootedness. No one finds rootedness in an abstract community, but in the rootedness of the local. And I have here another kind of word art for you on his talk. But I think it was then important to go out to Sheffield and these different places and take little roots into Sheffield that became rootedness in this place, in this locality. And then finally on Thursday, having thought about our roots and liberty and legacy, we begin to think about the roots and roots of chaplaincy yesterday. And so I think the question that I kept hearing over and over again in some form or other yesterday was this question of simultaneously being expected to be a member of a particular faith, and not to lose one's way, while also being generous, hospitable, and available to all students. And I should have added faculty and staff. And then these were some of the other themes that I heard about Gen Z, the need for peace and conflict resolution, and to push away from surface interfaith interactions. And then finally, I agreed. I really enjoyed yesterday's panel plenary. It was one of the highlights of the week for me too, and I felt like there was a merging of our roots and roots together as we asked a lot of questions about what we've encountered here, and I think very honest questions about where we've been as we've traveled this journey together. And I appreciated the laughter, the honesty, and the reflection. And then finally, last night, I feel like we celebrated the truly extraordinary space that has been held open for us here. I just want to say, I don't know, it's so hard to create a space, especially in a world, we talk about polarization all week in various ways, right? It's so hard to come together in this time and space, to be rooted here as such a diverse group of people with diverse dining needs and requirements and religious observances and points of view and different, coming from all over the world. I mean, what a miracle this is, really, that we could come together this week. And I just want for us to take just a few seconds of appreciation again for Jeremy and for all of the planning team and for the local team at Sheffield who made this space possible with a lot of work so that we could come together and explore roots and roots together. So thank you for that. Really hard work. And now I want to send this out with some reflecting questions. Having created some small roots here in Sheffield, and celebrating new and old relationships, and as we prepare to take our respective roots back home, these are the questions that I'm thinking about, and maybe that you would be interested in thinking about too. How have we become more committed to our roots, and any roots we have been on? How have our roots been complicated by the routes we've taken this week? And are there any new routes and maybe roots in store for us? So thank you all very much for this opportunity to be here with you.
Good morning. Good morning. I have no presentation, and so I thought it would be more comfortable to stand in the middle. Now this morning, it's all about entering on 6, so it's doing better. This morning, I was reflecting on why it is I've been invited to address this conference as it comes to a close, and I couldn't quite work it out why, coming from my gold screen Orthodox Jewish bubble, you might want me here to think about these issues. So I called my wife, which is always a good idea. And my wife said, it's very, very straightforward. The conference needs someone to end it, who is inspirational, who is extraordinary, who will leave people with something they will never forget. But unfortunately, there was no one like that available, so they asked me. Now, some of you may not have met Jews or rabbis, although probably by now you're rather used to us. So let me tell you something about rabbis through the prism of a very brief story. In my synagogue, as in many, on a Saturday morning after the service is finished, we have a small reception called a kiddush. And people have a little bit of food, something to drink, and they chat. And I overheard the following conversation from a visitor. The visitor leant across to one of my congregants and said, "You really should come to our synagogue." So why is that? Because our rabbi can speak for an hour about absolutely anything. And I overheard one of my people say that's nothing. Our rabbi can speak for 2 hours about absolutely nothing. Now, so much of this is true that I recall recently clearing out a cupboard at home, and I came across a box which was not familiar. I opened the box, and in the box there were 3 eggs and £2,000 in cash. So I said to my wife, "What's this? I've never seen this before." So she said, "Well, I didn't want you to find it, but from the day you entered the rabbinate, every time you gave a bad sermon, I put an egg in the box." So that's extraordinary. It's almost 25 years. Only 3 bad sermons. But what's the £2,000 for? She goes, "Oh, when I had a dozen, I sold them for £1." And so, by now, you will have heard that I'm not a chaplain. I've never been a chaplain, and I have no intention of ever being a chaplain. But I've been here this week with my colleague Sophie Dunlop because we hire chaplains We employ them, we look after them, we work with them, we recruit them, and we try to make them effective on campuses for Jewish students and for other students around the country. So, to some degree, I'm a participant, but I also sort of stand on the edge in all of the work that most of you do, even though I don't do it myself. Now, there have been lots of thanks already, mostly to Jeremy and the team, local team, planning teams, many, many people mentioned and not yet mentioned who have made this extraordinary event possible. There have been years of planning. Jeremy reminded me that it's 4 years since I came here to meet with a steering group. Obviously, it was supposed to be 2 years ago, but it's 4 years ago. And his amazing attention to detail have been well rewarded by a stellar attendance at a varied and interesting programme. But there's a special thank you from the Jewish participants. I know this is creating enormous anxiety, but for such excellent and well-planned kosher food arrangements. Jeremy, thank you so much. You've made this very, very well. Now, we've spent a remarkable few days together, and I know that each of us will be going home with an entirely different set of ideas, aspirations, and moments of inspiration. We've explored legacies, some positive, others less so, some very negative. But we have to embrace those legacies and understand them to be effective in our work and to remain relevant, as I'm going to address shortly. Liberty and growing opportunities have transformed the world for good, but they also create new challenges that we ignore at our peril. We've learned about the extraordinary benefits conveyed by commitment to some aspects of religious life, to almost every aspect of personal happiness and well-being, something we should be very proud of, especially good mental health, which has been understandably such a central focus of good chaplaincy and of this gathering. We've learned about the significance of relational presence, especially in increasingly secular space, and how virtual life has changed its presence radically during the pandemic, particularly for those with disabilities. We've heard about how underlying all of these themes that were ready now and yesterday is a word to which we keep reverting: leadership. And how well we manage the complexities of the modern campus scene will always come back to the calibre, effectiveness and bravery of our leaders. Yesterday's programme encouraged us to embrace different forms of leadership, those that are predictable and those that are disruptive, those that are helpful and those that are surprising. Good leadership on campus means that we need to admit and own what chaplaincy lacks, something I think we've been trying to do while we've been together this week. Where we fail, and most important, what we need to become. We will need to confront conflict, some large, some small conflicts, and for the sake of our learning, do what we can in the face of unresolvable clashes of paradigm that really characterise everything that we do. Irrespective, we each have come to this wonderful event for different reasons, hoping for different things. And each of us will be going home to our community, place of worship, organisation, family, with something different to share, something different to hold on to, something different to implement. But notwithstanding these differences, I think that there are some undeniable commonalities that have emerged from our gathering. Let me list some and dwell on them for a moment. I'm sure you'll have your favourites, some you don't agree with, thoughts and sessions that I didn't attend, and others still that I haven't mentioned. Here are a few. The power of love. The value of active listening and openness. The importance of presence, availability, visibility. The impact of a kind word. The irreducible importance of striving for equality. Empowering students to express emotions, even painful emotions. The value of silence. The importance of peace building and dialogue, even and perhaps especially where it's terribly difficult. The prevalence, perhaps ubiquity, of mental health challenges. The need for all of us, especially chaplains, to take care of ourselves before we can take care of others. Yet it occurs to me, there is another commonality. It's rather different from the others that I've mentioned, and the ones that I haven't mentioned, but has particularly characterised our journey together. And that is the existential need, whatever your belief or non-belief, wherever you're coming from, to remain relevant in a changing world. This is a constant, exhausting struggle, but one that we dare not get wrong. The struggle for relevance creates a tension. How do we remain true to our values, our faith-based beliefs, our practices, which are of ancient vintage and very often non-negotiable, yet still move with the times? How can we stay in step with modern sensitivities while still preserving our religious integrity? The reality of life on campus has changed dramatically. It's continuing to change, and I think I'm right that the pace of change is accelerating, as it has done in so many other areas of life. At one level, the chaplaincy scene and the priorities of students are almost unrecognisable from when I was a student at Oxford 35 years ago. At another level, the anxiety, self-doubt, internal conflict, loneliness, isolation, lack of purpose, as well as the search for meaning in life, are just the same. Plus ça change. They just may be presented a little differently. And to this thought, I would like to bring some Jewish wisdom. I make a lot of play about being a comedian, about being an organisational psychologist, but really at heart, I'm a rabbi. And what rabbis do, particularly rabbis like me, is delve deeply into the text to try to mine it for authentic meaning that can guide our lives in a useful, relevant and aligned way. Let me talk to you about the Book of Numbers. The Book of Numbers, on the surface, apart from a few interesting narratives in the middle, is extremely boring. It is only marginally less boring than the Book of Leviticus that precedes it. And the reason it's called the Book of Numbers, which is a fair reflection of a lot of its content, is because it contains lots of numbers. Lots of lists of tribal groupings, pages and pages of it. And you'll know that in synagogues we read the entire Pentateuch over the year cycle. And that means that it gets a full airing just as the more interesting bits. But the Book of Numbers is underrated. You remember that line? The Book of Numbers is underrated. And it's of particular interest because it guides a moving and transient world. It's the story of the Israelites moving through the desert. The first word of the book in Hebrew is in the desert. And that's how it's known colloquially in Jewish circles, not as the Book of Numbers, but as Bamidbar, which means in the desert. It's about a journey. It's about what happens in shifting sands, quite literally. And the Book of Numbers is of especial seasonal relevance because every synagogue in the world is reading at this time of year. That's just how it comes. If you think about it, since the cycle ends in October, that's about where we need to be to get through the whole thing in the book of Deuteronomy by the time the cycle ends. There is apparently in the book nothing long-term. We, Jews, derive from the Pentateuch the laws that govern our lives. And there are almost none in the book of Numbers. Almost all of the laws are in Leviticus and Deuteronomy. There are a few rebellions. They're quite a good story. A couple of plagues and lots of disappointments. But I want to hone in on a bit that you may not have noticed or paid much attention to. Chapter 10 of the book of Numbers. It's of particular interest because every diaspora synagogue in the world will read it tomorrow. I hope I'm going to get back in time. Right. God instructs Moses as follows. Moses, you are to alert the Israelites how to pack up, assemble, and gather an enormous number of people, hundreds of thousands or low millions of people, and to move them. How do you get them to move? They're going to move at God's command from one camp to the next. They're going to have to sometimes gather to protect themselves, to fight a war, and from time to time they will need to gather for religious purposes to celebrate festivals. That is the theme of chapter 10, how to gather the people and what medium is to be used to gather them. And it's a very simple medium. 2 silver trumpets. Here is the verse. I'm going to read it in Hebrew because I'm a hermeneuticist, and if you read it in translation, you lose what it actually says. I'll translate it, and I'm going to explain what I'm going to do with it. The verse says as follows. God spoke to Moses. Speaks to Moses. Make for yourself 2 silver trumpets. Make them from beaten silver. They shall be for you to summon the community and to enable the camps to travel. Every single word of this text is a gem, one that is relevant to our circumstance right now. The reason I read it in Hebrew is because those who have any biblical Hebrew will notice that there is a very, very obvious redundancy in the text near the beginning. It says, make for yourself. The word lachor for you is redundant. The text should have just said, make 2 silver trumpets. God is addressing Moses. He knows they're for him. What is this word for? This is how Jewish hermeneutics work. What is this word for? So already in the 12th century, the rabbis are worrying about this question. What does this word convey? Their conclusion, they're only for you. In the next generation of leadership, they'll make their own trumpets. These are for you to blow. These are for you to summon the camp. They're for you to cause the people to travel. And when you die, they will be put away. And the next generation will make their own trumpets. They are for you. That's why it says, make for yourself 2 silver trumpets. They're just for you. They're in the desert. They're moving from one place to another. What is this teaching? It's about distinguishing appropriately between the message and the medium of conveying the message. The message is constant, but the medium must constantly change. In every generation, there has to be a different call. There has to be a different way to gather the troops. There has to be a different way to gather people, to sound something they find relevant. This one word teaches us something critical about leadership, particularly in a shifting society. That whatever tradition, wherever we are, we each have a message that we regard as eternal, essential, existentially necessary, and it's a constant across generations, centuries, and millennia. But the medium by which we convey this message must change with the times and must adjust. It's not the message that changes, but the medium of delivery. In the next generation, they will have to make their own trumpets. But why are there 2 of these trumpets? It's not for volume. I would like to suggest, and bearing in mind you can't blow them both at once, so it requires 2 people. You can imagine one of those sort of iconic pictures with 2 people facing different directions, each blowing a long silver trumpet. You know the kind of picture I mean? One standing like this and one like that. That's the image that the text wishes to convey. It's to accommodate two simultaneous directions. It's to recognise that there will be times when there is a divergence. We heard one of the most fascinating, I think, moments, for those who didn't hear her, Grace Davey mentioned, and it's something obvious to all of us, that there is a simultaneous divergence on campus, an increase in secularism, sense of divesting oneself from religious beliefs or communities, and religious commitments at the same time. Communities and societies going in two different directions, both in tension, but nonetheless part of a whole. That's why there are two trumpets. The medium that we create must be capable of blowing in both directions, completely opposite directions, because that is how societies will pull. And it is possible, if we know how to create a medium to convey the message that is relevant and appropriate, it is possible to blow in both directions at once. And one final point. Mix shotal se oison. Make them from a single beaten piece of metal, not bits of stuff welded together, a single piece of metal beaten into a trumpet. What is the significance of this detail? Rabbi Shimshon Reflectors, writing in the mid-19th century in Germany, offers what I think is a brilliant explanation. I'm very worrying about it. When it's a single piece, it suggests a union, an alignment between the caller and the one being called, between the person blowing the trumpet and the person listening to the trumpet. There's a singularity. We are only effective when there is a sense of shared purpose, a shared identity between the leader and the community, between those of us who call out and those to whom we are calling. Ultimately, that's one of the great challenges of leadership, how to retain distinction while being similar, how to feel relevant and connected, and to share aspirations and strengths and weaknesses and celebrations and pain, while still in somehow being a leader. This is saying it is possible. It is possible to have a singularity, a shared alignment. In conclusion for this, a summary. Keep repackaging, but never compromise your values. Forge your own trumpets in each circumstance, in each generation. Don't use a previous generation's mode of communication. The development and the significance of social media over the last few years is a very potent example of this, of a medium that simply didn't exist in a previous generation, and who knows what the medium will be in future generations. Blow in both directions at once, in a way that can survive, perhaps even embrace the winds of change, and always be both a leader and one of the people sharing a direction and approach of Weltanschauung. And to finish, let me share a disruptive leadership thought from my favourite Hasidic rabbi. Embrace uncertainty rather than attempt to resolve it. One of the weaknesses of the way some religious systems are presented is that they have answers to everything, that there is no doubt. People say things like, you see, for the non-believer, there are no answers, but for the believer, there are no questions. You hear various things along these lines. Let me tell you something. I've been in this game for 25 years. It's nonsense. Believers who have no questions, no doubts, no unresolved issues, no anger at God from time to time, are either deluding themselves or are brain dead, meaning that they're not thinking at all. And I would like to say that the IACHE, who was a very controversial Polish thinker from the first half of the 19th century, his entire way of thinking was to embrace uncertainty. And he always identifies in biblical characters where they attempt to push everything into the black and white or embrace the grey. Our students live in the grey. Admit that we also live in the grey and embrace that uncertainty. And when we embrace uncertainty, rather than exude a kind of false certainty about key issues in life, we will find that we're able to successfully blow in both directions. I wish for all of us what I wish for myself and my chaplaincy team. The ability to take away something tangible and lasting from this conference. To feel recharged, inspired, connected to new, interesting colleagues, and most important, better able to navigate an ever-shifting campus landscape with confidence, clarity, and hope in good mental and physical health. You will.
Thank you so much, Jana and Harvey, for helping us to reflect and hopefully spur us on to do more reflection on our way home and beyond. Thank you so much. Thank you. We're now going to move on to our closing session. Thank you so much.